Welcome back, everyone. Once again, I am Fermi Okanlami, Dr. O. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a young Black man with brown skin, short black hair. I'm wearing dark rimmed glasses, a wooden bow tie, a blue collared shirt, and a blue vest. I identify as a cisgender disabled Black male who is sitting in a manual frame wheelchair. And I'm honored and proud to be the faculty advisor to the Student Diversity Council, as well as Medical Students for Disability Health and Advocacy, and the Diversity in Medicine student leaders here, and the brother from another mother of Dr. Ijeoma, Nnodim Opara. So without further ado, I mentioned this during our earlier presentation, but at times during conferences like this, people shy away from reading people's full bio, but I'm going to read her bio so you can just get just a fraction of what it is that she does and allow her to then tell you the rest. So Dr. Nnodim Opara is a double board certified assistant professor at the Wayne State University School of Medicine, Associate Program Director of the Internal Medicine and Pediatrics Residency Program, and an attending physician with the Wayne State University Physician Group. She is the founding director of the Innovative Health, Equity, and Justice in Medicine curriculum for internal medicine and pediatrics residents, which combines critical reflection, community engagement, scholarship, and advocacy to address social and structural determinants of health and health disparities. She is chair of the Southeast Michigan Center for Medical Education Committee on Social Determinants of Health Education and the Detroit Medical Center Graduate Medical Education Center for Quality Improvement, Social Determinants of Health section. She is also the co-founding director of the Wayne State University Global Health Alliance, a multidisciplinary organization created to unify university and regional global health practitioners and create a collaborative community of best practices in global and urban health. She co-created and co-directs the Global Urban Health and Equity Curriculum, GLUE, an innovative interprofessional comprehensive certificate and competency-based global health curriculum. Certified in clinical teaching by the Stanford Clinical Teaching Program and an inaugural fellow of the Academic Leadership Academy of Wayne State University. She is passionate about medical education, as well as mentoring residents and medical students in wellness, work-life integration, and academic career development. Committed to activism and advocacy, she serves as a member of the Wayne State County Medical Society Public Health Committee and the Consortium of Universities for Global Health's network of academic advisors to improve policy development and U.S. support for global health and international development. She also serves with multiple community-based organizations to uplift the health of those who are disenfranchised. She is the recipient of the Most Engaged Physician Award by the Detroit Medical Center in recognition of her excellent track record in community service, collaboration with colleagues, and advocacy. She provides clinical care to a chiefly underserved population, supervises resident clinics, and teaches inpatient ambulatory medicine. Her areas of academic interest are in health equity, justice, social and structural determinants of health, global health, and interprofessional education. A lead investigator in multiple interdisciplinary, multi-center, local, and international research projects, she focuses on understanding how resilience can be leveraged as an asset to improve community health outcomes and convergence implementation science in effective professional development in structural and social determinants of health, health equity, and social justice of health professional trainees. A certified facilitator in cultural competency, cultural humility, and microaggressions, and certified in global leadership by the American College of Academic International Medicine. She imbues every endeavor with her philosophy of ethical, culturally humble, patient-centered, evidence-based, high-value, compassionate care, and prioritizes attention to social determinants of health, disparities, and equity as a part of comprehensive approach to patients. She has a long-standing history of leadership and service to the African immigrant and African American communities, and co-founded Africans in Medicine, whose mission is to unite African medical professionals to further the health interests of Africans living on the continent and in the diaspora. Her hobbies include music, dance, theater, and writing, and she is the wife to Nkemjika and a proud mother to 3 beautiful girls, Ugo Chinyere, Oru Ububechi, and Chimamanda. Now, I'm Nigerian as well, but I'm Yoruba and she's Igbo, so I did the best job I could of pronouncing those Igbo names. But without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the amazing Dr. Ijeoma Nnodim Opara. Thank you for doing this.
Ile n'anya n'ihu, ile n'anya n'azụ, ile n'anya kekpe, ile n'anya n'ihu, Igbo onye Chukwu, anyị ga-ahụ ihe ga-eme wejawa Chineke mma. 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 Thank you, thank you, thank you. Amazing leaders and organizers of the Diversity in Medicine Conference, and my darling friend, brother, colleague, peer mentor, and sponsor, Dr. Oluwaferami Okanlami, for that outstanding, long-ass introduction. But I appreciate you, brother. I do. I really, really do. And listen, I didn't think it was possible after the brilliance that was last year's conference to do what you just did, okay, today. And you truly have all outdone yourselves. I mean, this was just a stellar conference. Thank you for inviting me back and honoring me with this platform. And of course, thank you to my co-keynote speakers, Dr. Abdul El Sayed, Dr. Italo Brown, my brothers, colleagues, and mentors from near and far for their inspiration and energy today. And of course, all the amazing panelists, especially the trainee panelists, thank you. And of course, last but definitely not the least, the audience. All 40 of you, and you know, half of you are my family members. That's fine. Thank you for coming in and hanging in there with us and taking all you've heard today and translating it into action. So I'd like to start with my positionality. Of course, my name is Dr. Ijeoma Nnodim Opara. My pronouns are she, her, and all. I am a cisgendered Black woman with caramel and chocolate skin tone and no visible disabilities. I'm wearing Black dark-rimmed glasses with short hair and a green shawl. My why, my mission in life is to dismantle the violent delusion of whiteness and white supremacism by eliminating anti-Black racism and race-based science from medicine, healthcare, and public health through the establishment of justice-centered systems of accountability via advocacy, activism, scholarship, education, and clinical practice. I am speaking to you from the occupied original homelands of the Anishinaabe or Three Fires people, the Odawa, the Potawatomi, and the Ojibwe. I originate from the great country of Nigeria, like my brother here, located in the richest, most powerful continent in the world, Africa, where ultimately we all originate from. So there's that. Now, my people are the phenomenal Igbo, and I honor my ancestors, especially on this Women's History Month, my women and FAIM ancestors, both from the continent and her diaspora, whose immeasurable strength, courage, and brilliance made it possible for me to stand before you, an unapologetically Black African woman. As the firstborn daughter of an Igbo family, I gotta tell you, I am automatically awarded the title Ada, which is a highly regarded position of honor, responsibility, and leadership. My last name by marriage is Opara, which is the title given to the first son of an Igbo family. It is also highly esteemed. So I like to tell folks that I'm both the first daughter and the first son. So you don't want to catch these hands, okay? I'm all the children. I'm all the people, okay? And you know what? Some folks mispronounce my last name Opara as Oprah. And do you think I correct them? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm not trying to block my blessings, okay? If you say I'm Oprah, well, then how you doing? All right? I stay manifesting, y'all. Name and claim, okay? I have no slides for you today, nor do I have any disclosures. We're just gonna have a conversation. So, on January 20th, 2021, at the inauguration of the 46th President of the United States of America, 79-year-old Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., a 22-year-old Black woman set the nation ablaze with her fiery words as she stood in front of the US Capitol, a building made real by the enslaved labor of her ancestors. This is what Amanda Gorman said. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The lust we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just is isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny Black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tied, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together victorious, not because we would never again know defeat, but because we would never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we are to live up to our own time, then victory won't lighten the blade. But in all the bridges we've made, that is the promise to glade. The hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than the pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith, we trust. For while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eye on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it, we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while we ask, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become our burdens, but one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left with. Every breath from my bronze pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the golden hills of the west. We will rise from the windswept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light, if only we are brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it. When day comes, when day comes. But let me ask you, fine people, has day come? Huh? Has it come? Have we stepped out of the shade, aflame and unafraid? Have we learned that quiet isn't always peace? The norms and notions of what just is isn't always justice. What just is isn't always justice, isn't always justice. Now, let me be transparent, family. As I contemplated the theme for today's outstanding conference, I found myself struggling, y'all. I must confess. I'm thinking about this theme, partnering for change, amplifying our collective voices. I felt overwhelmed as I reflected on the struggle bus that has been the last couple of years dealing with a once in a millennial pandemic that awoke the nation to the fact that we're not as resource unlimited as we thought. Okay, a pandemic that not only lifted up the carpet where we had attempted to hide all our inherent inequities, injustices, disinvestments, and failures of government and industry to care for the least of these, on whose backs, ironically, but not unintentionally, the self-same government and industry are built and maintained. A pandemic that rode on the back of the longest running pandemic itself, white supremacy, and her violent, intersecting, mutually reinforcing children, racism in all her forms, structural, systemic, institutional, interpersonal, intrinsic, colonialism, patriarchy, ableism, capitalism, xenophobia, and homophobia. A pandemic that exploited the cracks of neoliberal individualism that weakens the communal infrastructure critical to surviving and thriving despite societal assaults, whether from infectious disease, economic insecurity, or loneliness. You see, I was on the front lines braving the belly of these beasts as a physician and healthcare team member in the hospital and clinics and the field, working in the community with the Detroit Health Department to provide care of the homeless and housing insecure folks at the height of the pandemic. I was battling disinformation on social media via webinars and writing in practice, especially addressing the disinformation targeting Black, Indigenous, and Brown communities, both in and outside healthcare. I was wrestling as a Black woman with the structural, systemic, and institutional racism, misogyny, and patriarchy, xenophobia, especially Afrophobia, day in and day out, shown on both micro, meso, and macro levels, honey. All the while teaching, mentoring, sponsoring, counseling, coaching, mothering, daughtering, sistering, barely wifing, and forfeiting my career, promotion, and overall mental, physical, and spiritual health as multiple traumas compounded in my body. I grieved and grew. I hurt and hoped. I was tired and still tried. Tried to contribute, aligned to the new chapter Amanda Gorman calls us to author so that catastrophe would not prevail over us. But I ask again, y'all, has day come? Have we stepped out of the shade? Have we moved the needle of injustice, inequity, oppression, and violence that fuel this intersecting tridemic of COVID-19, racial injustice, and economic devastation? Have we restructured the foundations of what the amazing Nicole Hannah-Jones calls the 1619 Project? That what the great poet and writer Langston Hughes in his poem, American Heartbreak 1619 referred to when he wrote, "I am the American heartbreak, the rock on which freedom stumped its toe, the great mistake that Jamestown made long ago." Or have we chosen to step farther into the night, paralyzed into inertia and inaction, to embrace that which divides us and the force that would shatter our nation rather than share it? The force that lies within nice, well-meaning minds, good, intentioned souls, church-going bodies, urban, suburban, and rural dining tables, places and spaces of worship, recreational centers, libraries, grocery stores, police stations, courtrooms, schools, hospitals, clinics, health centers, medical schools, health departments, corporations, and governments. The force of October 1705, Virginia Slave Code, the force of July 4th, 1776, American Declaration of Independence rooted in anti-Blackness, the force of March 6, 1857, Dred Scott versus Stanford, where the Supreme Court declared African Americans not citizens of the United States, the force of April 12, 1861, American Civil War fought on the basis of state rights to hold enslaved Africans, the force of 1877 through 1964, Jim Crow segregation laws, the force of May 31, 1921, Tulsa Massacre, the force of January 6, 2021, Capitol Hill insurrection. The force attacking the truth in our schools and institutions, attacking speaking the truth, attacking teaching the truth about American and world history to our children and each other, attacking and learning of the critical tools to resist the doom of repeating the past instead of repairing it. The force attacking affirmative action, women and reproductive rights, voting rights, transgender rights. The force that maintains a white supremacist, colonialist, patriarchal, ableist, hierarchical structure in the policies, processes, practices, norms, culture, and values of our systems of education, academia, criminal justice, finance, housing, government, media, entertainment, and the medicine, healthcare, public health, industrial complex. The force that drives disparities, the force that does not see the humanity of others and devalues the lives of those who are intentionally excluded, disinvested in, marginalized, and oppressed. This force that functions to maintain the status quo because way too many people holding political, economic, cultural, and social power benefit from the way things are right now. And the rest of us have chosen not to hold those people accountable and force them to cede power. The force that maintains the gap between good intentions and action, sustainable, powerful, transformative action. The force that disrupts the collective action and impairs the partnerships that are required to dismantle it, to undo it, to eradicate it. Because that's what's needed to dismantle, undo, and eradicate this force, isn't it? And wouldn't you agree? Collective strategic action through the tool of collaborative partnerships to organize and amplify our collective voices. But without a critical analysis of the nature, power dynamics, and the historical socio-political context of these partnerships, they are inevitably doomed to fail. Without a critical analysis of whose voices constitute the collective and are centered within the collective of these partnerships, they are inevitably doomed to fail. And without a critical analysis of what those voices are saying, not only verbally and through the written word, but also financially, economically, and through the power of the vote, these partnerships are inevitably doomed to fail. And so to foster the partnerships that amplify our collective voices in order to result in the change that matters, the change defined by those most multiply marginalized and oppressed through the intentional design of unjust systems upheld by our daily decisions. The fundamental change that transforms structures by boldly targeting root causes, underlying pathology, not downstream symptoms. We must reimagine partnerships through the lens of not what just is, but justice. Now, what does that mean? It means to examine the why, who, and how of our partnerships. So let's start with why. The inestimable Muri, that's Indigenous Australian activist, artist, and academic, Professor Lila Watson said, if you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. One of the student panelists earlier, Lauren Wooten, reminded us to always be checking our why. When you are thinking about engaging in partnerships to address a specific issue, why are you engaging with that issue? Why should it be you that is to be part of addressing that issue and in the way you are choosing to address it? What do you stand to gain or lose by engaging with this issue? How does the resolution of that issue affect or not affect you? Why is it important to you? How does the issue speak to your personal and professional mission or purpose statement? Are you trying to, quote, help, or have you internalized that if anyone of the human family is not free, none of us are free? That our collective liberation is bound up with each other. Now, when myself and my resident and student leaders from Wayne State University School of Medicine and Detroit Medical Center implemented our AAMC-funded, the American Academic Association of Medical Colleges, funded curriculum, Healing Between the Lines, also known as HBL, we were very intentional and clear about our why. To give background, HBL is a curriculum that disrupted the traditional colonial structure of academic community partnerships and reimagined a community-led academic partnership with community organizers who were working on mitigating the health legacies of redlining in the city of Detroit. The five of us, myself, Mr. Cedric Mutebi, Ms. Capricia Bell, Ms. Taylor Barrow, and Dr. Serena Rodriguez Rivera, were clear that as Black physicians, faculty, resident, and medical student, that we wanted to transform medical school curricula at its very core, because we were sick and tired of being sick and tired of seeing our family and community members, loved ones, and folks who looked like us being killed in the street and in hospital beds because of unchecked whiteness, unchecked white patriarchal supremacy codified, embedded, and knitted in the systems of society, including the medical and healthcare industrial complex. Because of our level of structural competency and knowledge of history, we recognize the role American and European physicians and scientists played in justifying oppressive systems designed to feed racial capitalism by perpetuating the lie of biological race and therefore Black inherent inferiority. We also recognize how those lies still permeate present-day clinical practice, policies, processes, norms, and values, and that they needed to be identified, named, uprooted, and eradicated. This was a matter of life and death for us. And for me, I already shared with you earlier that my personal mission in life is to see to the end of the violent delusion of white patriarchal supremacy by eliminating anti-Black racism in medicine, healthcare, and public health. So with our community partners, we co-designed the HBL curriculum, which provided the historical and socio-political context that explains current day disparate outcomes in Detroit, as outlined earlier by Dr. Abdul El Sayed. The curriculum was taught by the living containers, the griots of that history and the experts of living with and intervening on those outcomes in their day-to-day, our partners. We created justice circles consisting of medical trainees and partners to address one redlining legacy area, which the partners were already working on, by collaborating on co-constructing policy briefs, which were presented to legislative partners to translate into legislation. Because we were clear on who we were and our why, it informed who we partnered with and how we engaged in those partnerships. So friends, what is your why? Now this brings me to the who. In Igbo, we have a saying, onye were mmadụ ka onye were go. That means the person who has people is richer than the one who has money. So as we clarified our reason for HBL, it was clear as day that the most important resource for us was our own people. We recognized that we needed to partner with Black-led community organizers who were doing the long, hard grassroots work of addressing the legacies of redlining. Folks with whom we had already built trusting relationships and with whom we could mutually amplify our work by driving the narrative of a justice-centered medical curriculum, as Dr. Italo Brown spoke about in his ACED framework. It was clear that it needed to be a transdisciplinary effort that transcended medicine and healthcare and needed the voices of those involved in law, in activism and community organizing, as well as restorative justice and Black liberatory practices. See, to partner for change and amplify collective voices, fam, we're going to have to need to reimagine who we collaborate with and intentionally disrupt colonial and white supremacy or dominant cultural logics that inform what a partner looks like or what they can contribute and how we measure and value various types of contributions. As we are thoughtful, intentional, and strategic about who we partner with, what is the value system we are drawing on to inform that process and decision-making? Do we value the totality of the persons or people with whom we engage, or rather what we think we will benefit from them? In other words, extract from them. What about the people outside of our field? Is there a place for artists, single parents, folks living with disabilities, people doing sex work, those with housing insecurities, poor people as true partners, nay, leaders whom we follow. Again, who constitutes the collective voice? What voices are centered and what are the voices saying out loud? Do we hear the voices reminding us of linguistic justice and that language matters? That Black people and folks of intentionally excluded and oppressed identities don't just die from health disparities. They don't just die from health disparities, but they are killed by preventable diseases of systemic oppression and structural violence. Do we hear the voices that remind us that Black folks are not just high risk for poor outcomes, but they are put at risk for poor outcomes by, you got that right, structural violence and systemic injustice and oppression inside of white supremacist, anti-Black racist systems and structures? We got to name it. We cannot undo what we cannot name, y'all. We cannot undo what we cannot name, y'all. Do we hear the voices that challenge the minority tax or penalty and reframe it as the majority subsidy, as our often uncompensated labor frequently translates to an unearned advantage of those privileged by race and gender due to white supremacy and patriarchy in the ecosystem of academia, medicine, healthcare, and public health? That they are not vulnerable, they are made vulnerable by what? Again, you got that right, $400, Alex, right? Structural violence and systemic injustice and oppression. Do we hear the voices that remind us that they are not voiceless? They are unheard. And finally, this brings us to the how. How we partner matters. The peerless Dr. Kamara Jones always reminds us to ask ourselves, hey, yo, how is racism operating here? I expand that to ask it, how are external and internalized systems of oppression operating in this partnership or partnerships? How is power operating here? How is it being talked about or not talked about, shared, or even seeded? In the unspoken and unspoken dynamics of this relationship through the policies, processes, practices, values, and norms, how is racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, classism, elitism operating here? Because fam, listen, look, this is the key. It's always operating. And this is free. I won't even charge you for this. It is always operating, always. And the hubris to think it is not is extremely dangerous. Based on the degree of our structural competency, cultural humility, and willingness, we are either through action or inaction, a conduit for these systems or an impediment. As Drs. Angela Davis and Ibram X. Kendi state, in a racist society, which is the status quo, it is not enough to be non-racist, we must be anti-racist. And this lives inside of the series of intentional decisions we make every day. Referencing Dr. Jones again, she defines health equity as the assurance of the conditions for optimal health for all people, which requires valuing all individuals and populations equally, recognizing and rectifying historical injustices, and providing resource according to need. So in what ways have we knitted the recognition and rectifying of historical injustices, which intersect with the provision of resources according to need, by the way, into the fabric of our partnerships? In co-developing, implementing, and evaluating HBL with our partners, we had many courageous conversations, I can't even tell you, that discussed the traditional colonial positionality of academic institutions when engaging with communities. We owned up to the historical and ongoing role our particular institution, as well as the academic, medical, and healthcare institutions writ large, have played through action and inaction to uphold the status quo and impede true structural change. Therefore, although we discussed community needs, we didn't focus on them, but lifted up and leveraged community assets and strengths to address the key issues identified. We were intentional about recognizing the diversity and intersectionality within Black communities and lifting up our collective assets, strengths, solutions, and creative brilliance, our Black magic, shall we say. We also had courageous conversations among ourselves as a leadership team as to how white supremacy culture may be operating among us and informing our operations, because cultural humility teaches us that none of us, regardless of color or genitalia of the body we're in, are exempt from the impact of the systems of oppression that we are born into and conditioned by. Tema Okun describes these cultural norms and values as perfectionism. These are this white supremacy culture, and she has a great website and resource for this. Perfectionism, urgency, quantity over quality, worship of the written word, defensiveness, paternalism, either or thinking, power hoarding, fear of open conflict. Progress is bigger, more linear, individualism, objectivity, and rights to comfort. I also add to this list 3 of my personal favorites: the over-intellectualization of very human, very emotional, very soulful realities, including the over-studying to death by inertia of the very things our ancestors solved centuries ago. The assumption of the dark continent, that is, that nothing exists in a particular place until you came along, and the exclusion and denigration of indigenous and local knowledge, epistemology, and solutions. How do you identify these cultural norms and values of whiteness in your processes, practices, policies, and operations? And what is your plan to interrupt, dismantle, and eradicate them? As I conclude my remarks, I'm reminded about the Johnson brothers, James Weldon and Jay Rosamond, who gifted us the song that we refer to as the Black National Anthem. You all should know it, right? And if so, join with me to sing that first phrase there. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. For Amanda Gorman's day to come, that we may step out of the shade aflame and unafraid. Every voice needs to be lifted high so that the harmonies of each pitch, tone, and cadence moves the earth, the heavens, and the sea. For the new dawn to bloom as we free it, we must recognize that there is always light if we are brave enough to identify that force that would rather shatter our nation than share it in our very selves, in our relationships, in our community engagements and partnerships, in our institutions, in our homes and spheres of influence. It is in the courage of facing ourselves and having courageous conversations of the why, who, and how of our partnerships that we are able to reimagine ourselves, our relationships, institutions, yes, even our nation, even the world, through the lens of justice. It is in the transformation of this reimagination that we can then intentionally climb the hill to reconstruct a new dawn. Ilenya nihu, ilenya nazu, ilenya kekbe, ilenya karim. Ibu onye juku anyị ga-ahụ ihe ga-eme wejawa Chineke mma. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for this platform. I hope that I added some value to the conversation today. Blessings, love, and light to you. Love yourselves, love each other, build community with intentionality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Opara. I sincerely think it's just such a privilege to hear you talk, and I'm always in awe every time I get the opportunity to hear you speak. It's so beautiful, and I want to thank you so much for your time. We do have a question from the audience. It's very similar to a question that we posed to Dr. Brown earlier, and I'm interested to hear your take on this one. So the audience member asked, Dr. Opara, you bring so much energy to your work. It's hard to imagine anything getting you down, but I'd like to know how you find that energy when you hit setbacks. Have you ever experienced burnout?
Oh, wow. Thank you. Great question. So let me count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, a million burnouts. Yes, absolutely. I don't call them burnouts. Okay. I feel, again, my approach, I come from things from a structural systemic level. These are symptoms of structural failure. These are symptoms of what we term burnout. Really is a symptom of structural systemic failure. It's a power failure of the structures that cause me to overwork and be undercompensated to dismantle the systems I did not create, nor do I benefit from, right? And so to the question, so yes, real talk, absolutely. But you know what? I turned 40 last year, and I said, my brother, Dr. Abdul El Sayed said, I'm not young, but I'm not old. Honey, I'm young. I stay young, okay? I'll be 150,000 and I'll be young, okay? You better tell everybody that, all right? And so I'm a young 40. And as a result, I was very clear, after my auntie, our collective auntie Bell Hooks died, I said, okay, that's enough. Erica Gardner died. A lot of our leaders, our queens, especially our kings died who are doing this work. I said, girl, you need to protect those telomeres, okay? Like it is crude oil and you are the United States government, okay? And I said I needed to protect those telomeres. So when Dr. Tyler Brown was talking about rest, I said, listen, that is revolutionary. And we learned this from our Black feminist and womanist work leaders who are clear that joy, rest, play, love, including love making. Hello. These are all revolutionary acts to take care of ourselves and to remind ourselves that we are whole people. And so I'm intentional about music and about dance and about always showing up as my authentic self, because I believe that, misalignment of your true self with the way you show up in the world is part of what contributes to depression, anxiety, unhappiness, discomfort, angst. Is that double, triple, multiple consciousness that Du Bois and Frantz Fanon spoke about that I think sort of renders the internal core and soul of Black folk. And so for me, it is me being in this moment, singing a song in my language, speaking my language, even in the midst of English, and using song and poetry to communicate. These are authentic to my culture as an African woman and a Black woman. And I show up that way intentionally. This is part of my revolutionary work. This is how I prevent burnout, because I'm not trying to be like anybody, and usually anybody is whiteness. And so I actively reject whiteness and embrace fully, which is an active work, because everything usually conspires to be to reject Blackness. So it is active work to wake up in the morning and embrace and love and massage my Blackness and kiss my Blackness and honor my Blackness and respect my Blackness, because everything else says not to, right? We live in an anti-Black society. And so that is part of my joy. That is part of how I keep my energy. My babies, speaking the truth also helps to keep energy. I say the truth. I call things out as they are. I use the proper names. I don't hide behind words of bias or microaggression. Racism is racism, white supremacy is white supremacy, misogyny, patriarchy is patriarchy. I don't coddle feelings. I say the truth, because that's how I sleep very well. So I take care of my telomeres by saying the truth. And what's his name said this, Wooten, the student earlier who did an outstanding job. And I am a fan of Dr. Alita Maybanks, honor her and the work she's doing in the AMA. Absolutely, you say the truth. So I say the truth, and I strive to live the truth. I strive to always practice joy. I tell jokes. I love humor. I love terrible humor. I dance. I play with my babies. I love nature. I play with my husband. And I stay close to family. And I always I'm rooted in community. So that's how I practice self-care, which is community care, and try to show up in the world authentically. And that's what I do. And sometimes do I have days that I'm down and burn out? Absolutely. But you know what? It's temporary. And I also ground myself in history. That's the last point I'll make. And history tells me we win. So I'm cool with that. Okay.
Thank you so much. I do have a couple more questions in the chat, if you're willing to answer them.
I am very willing, honey. That is why I'm here. I shut my whole day down. I said, listen, I'm for these students. I am theirs today, honey. Diversity in medicine, U of M. Yes, go blue. I'm here. Go ahead.
I know we could talk to you literally all day. So thank you so much for giving us your time. One attendee is asking, I've seen you utilizing social media to continue spreading this message. Could you speak to that?
Ooh, child. Okay, so thank you for highlighting that. So I host a weekly Twitter space, and I gave up the Twitter space for y'all. So you're welcome. It's every Saturday, 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern time. It's on Twitter. Oh, I'll put my information in the chat. Follow me, y'all, and I, try to dismantle white supremacy on Twitter. Good luck to me, right? But I curated a space called the Roundtable, which is hashtag AIMART, which is Anti-Racism in Medicine Action Roundtable. And essentially, I show up there to say, okay, this is my mission. I tie everything I do to my why. That's why it's so important to be clear about why I'm on Earth. Why did the Creator take their blessed time and create me and make me in this world? And so I know, even if I was a bus driver, even if I was a venture capital, I will never be that, I don't think so, but definitely a bus driver or a janitor, a doctor or a nurse, or whatever I am in this life, I will be doing this, through that, because that is my mission as me, not my job title. Your job title is just your job title. That's your title. That's your tool that you use to exercise your purpose. You know what I mean? So even if, tomorrow I can't do this job anymore because, life happens, I will still do this. I will find a way. I will just have to pivot to another tool to still work on dismantling anti-Black racism, eliminating anti-Black racism from medicine, public health, and healthcare. And so social media is a tool, just like that. And so I curated this roundtable on Twitter to bring the people together, because what often happens is that, again, a function of colonialism and white supremacy culture, people work in silos, people work individually, right? We need to curate. I tell folks, listen, we have enough good ideas. We need innovation in collaboration. We need innovation in bringing people together, raising the awareness of the good that already exists. I'm sick and tired of folks, coming at me like, nobody is doing this and nobody is doing that. And because of the intentional work I do, I know at least 3 people doing exactly the thing they assumed wasn't being done. Now, it's not necessarily their fault. The system is created to separate us in a way that we are unaware of what's going on. Sometimes in our backyard, sometimes right under our nose, right? So it requires some intentionality. And so I said, listen, I could use social media to do that, to expose people to the awesome people that I know that are doing great work. I read someone said that no, Black folks aren't talking about disability. I said, what? Have you met Dr. O? Look, and I just, come. This is his contact information. I connect people. I'm a connector. I love connecting folks and building network and community. So that is a tool through the roundtable, which is every Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. You are welcome to join, to bring folks together and say, look, we have an amazing community of folks that are doing great things. I keep my energy because I see people doing amazing things. People using their black brilliance, their Black magic, honey, to make change. I see it every day. Young people like all y'all who have put together this outstanding a conference. Are you kidding? Look at what you've done. I say, listen, if I don't do nothing but tell these young people how powerful they are, I've done my job. You know what I mean? Y'all are powerful. Refuse to be discouraged. Refuse to be disillusioned. The system needs you to be disillusioned and believe the myth of your powerlessness so that you don't change it, because you have exactly the power to do so. You're doing it right now. I was listening to, I think, was it Hamza or Hafsa? I don't want to mispronounce their name. And then the young lady from before who presented their work. I said, what? You see what these young people are doing? They're changing laws out here for ESKD, for patients without who are undocumented. And this young lady is changing her entire school's curriculum. Look at what these amazing, wonderful folks are doing. Y'all, look in the mirror and remind yourself of your power. It's a lie that you can't make change. You are making change every day. And you need to know that. So that's what the roundtable is for, to highlight the amazing work and lift up things. You know, folks, again, silos, right? Understanding that we're not going to do this work without pulling in and connecting with folks in different spheres and it's going to require us knowing what's going on in tech, what's going on in engineering, what's going on in architecture, what's going on in urban planning, what's going on in every kind of space, in law, in social work. It's going to require us, listen, it's going to require us to think beyond human species. We need to understand what's going on in animal health, what's going on with the planet and the environment and as a whole. So losing a One Health or planetary health outlook is going to be critical to dismantling these structures of oppression. So that's what this space is, you know, for me to amplify this work across various disciplines and sectors and folks doing work on the grassroots and the grass tops and let folks understand we are a community. We need to just be more innovative of how we create these communities to stay together. Then I do a workshop on Clubhouse at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time on Saturdays, which is a skills building workshop. So we focus on specific tools and understanding them, breaking them down, and how do we take those tools and enact anti-Black racism in anti-racism, forgive me, in our respective institutions. So that's what I do on social media, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, and it's also a lot of fun. You gotta have joy in work, honey, okay, for that sustainability, right? But it feeds to my purpose. That's the thing I do. I always make sure whatever I'm engaging is feeding to my purpose and that I am experiencing joy in it. And I do. I hope that answered the question.
I definitely think it did, and we can all feel that joy, which is what I love so much about hearing you speak, is it's so clear to get that joy from you. I have one last question for you, and I think it'll be a good way to round out the day. The question is, earlier today, we talked about waning energy for the DEI space. What is the best way to continue to keep oneself on the right track to be actively anti-racist and not just not racist? To remind ourselves a week, a month, a year after this energizing talk, how best to dismantle these systemic issues.
Okay, so 3 things. One is take care of yourselves. You gotta, you know, again, going back to what we talked about, that joy. Make sure you are staying in a position of joy, and that you're resting your body, your spirit, your mind. You're doing what you care about. You are actively rejecting white supremacist lies of inadequate, white supremacist capitalist lies of inadequacy, not being good enough, not being enough, and all those other false narratives. So make sure that you are doing that always, and engaging in whatever your practice is. You take care of your spirit, not just body, mind, mental, we're soul. And so take care of that. The second piece is make sure you're actively engaged in your own self-development. I should show you my camera, the books that have piled up. I need another bookshelf. So ensure that you are still reading Black scholars, Indigenous scholars, Brown scholars, and that you're also decolonizing your epistemology sources, right? Because not everybody writes in books. So think about also non-published work, because we theorize in music, we theorize through dance, we theorize through play, right? And plays and theater. So thinking through, you know, where are my sources of, where else am I sort of exposing myself and increasing my knowledge and understanding and aptitude of, you know, this work. First of all, of myself, know your own. I always say this, before you be out here trying to know people, know yourself, right? Like know your own story, know the story of your land, know the story of your lineage, know that story. And then as you know that story, you know, you're learning other things, but you got to always start leading yourself before you out here trying to do things. Okay. So being always engaged in, you know, I heard about podcasts earlier in the conference. So what podcasts you're listening to, what documentaries you're watching, things of that nature. So always ensuring that you are lifting up the work of Black, Indigenous, and Brown scholars, and of course, folks with as much multiply intersectional identities as possible, you know, folks who are disabled, folks who are LGBTQIA, FEMs, women, and the list goes on. And thirdly, always be connected to community. You know, always be connected to your community of work, and ensure that, you know, they are in the leading and you are in the passenger, and you are just following when they want you to come to the front, come to the front. When they want you to go to the back, go to the back, you know, and just always be grounded in that. Don't be alone. Don't do this solo. You got to do it with folk, intertwined and connected with folk. This is not a solo work. It's not going, don't work like that. Never has, never will. So that's also really key.
Thank you so much, Dr. Opara. I honestly don't think we could all thank you enough. This was absolutely the perfect way to close out our conference today. I'm now going to invite Karen back, and together her and I are going to just do our final wrap up of the conference. But seriously, thank you, thank you, thank you. We can't say thank you enough.
You are welcome. And I'm putting my Twitter and Instagram handle in the chat, and I'll put my email also. Feel free. I love DMs. I love emails. I live for them. I love everything y'all write me. So please stay in touch, and thank you again.
Thank you. So we just wanted to say one final thank you for attending the conference today. As a medical student group planning our second virtual conference, we continue to be blown away by everyone's excitement and level of engagement, even through this virtual platform. But we really wish that we could have met you all in person, of course. We will work on uploading the videos of these talks to our YouTube channel so that they're accessible after the conference today. We also hope the conversation doesn't end here, and you continue to work and lead in this space even after today.
We also want to thank our generous sponsors here at Michigan Medicine, including the Department of General Surgery, Anesthesia, Emergency Medicine, Neurology, Neurosurgery, Urology, Pathology, Pediatrics, Psychiatry, Otolaryngology, Dermatology, Radiology, Cardiac Surgery, Radiation Oncology, and the Office for Health Equity and Inclusion. Without their support, this event would not have been possible. Also, a huge thank you to the poster presenters for sharing your incredible work with us today. Your posters will continue to be available on the Poster Hall website for viewing even after the conference today. Thank you also to Dr. O for his continued support and guidance in planning the conference. We also want to take the time to thank our captioning services and ASL interpreters for allowing us to reach an even wider audience today. Lastly, thank you to the incredible team of medical students who have contributed over the last year to planning this amazing conference. We would now like to ask these students to turn their cameras on so that the attendees can see the faces of everyone who made the conference possible today. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed your day, and we can't wait to continue these conversations offline as well. We look forward to seeing you next year, and hopefully it'll be in person. Thank you all for joining today.